Hi, so I see a lot of thumbs up and the numbers are kind of slowing down. So we'll go ahead and kick it off and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight to do a little bit of a walkthrough of the FAFSA, which recently opened in late December with quite a few changes. And so I'm joined here with some of my colleagues from the Georgia Tech Office of Scholarship and Financial Aid, who will be walking through and hopefully answering a lot of your questions that you might have as you might be already working through filling out the FAFSA. So we'll go ahead and get started. Some housekeeping, just to let you know, we have a pretty big group today. We know kind of timing wise, January is a busy month right now for filling out the FAFSA. So we wanted to make sure to accommodate as many as we can. So a large group, we are joined by a number of our colleagues in the Office of Admission, as well as the Office of Scholarship and Financial Aid, and they'll be able to answer your questions in the Q&A here in Zoom. So if you do have questions, you can ask those questions there. I will say, just when it comes to sometimes financial aid questions that might be pretty specific and very much a personal situation, we're going to try to answer the questions that really are applicable to everyone. We are accessible throughout business hours, Monday through Friday, to help answer those more specific questions by reaching out to our offices. But really for today, we want to make sure that we're going to be answering those larger questions that are really applicable to everyone. So that was my kind of one housekeeping note, but want to thank everyone again for joining us. I also want to introduce myself. My name is Andrew Cohen. I am the Associate Director for Guest Experience within the Office of Undergraduate Admission, and excited to be here with all of you today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleagues from our Office of Scholarship and Financial Aid, who have been living and breathing all of these FAFSA changes for a number of months now, and are really going to be able to share some of their expertise with all of you tonight. And the last thing I forgot to say is we are recording this, so we will get this information out to all of the attendees probably next week to help you as you continue to work through submitting your FAFSA. But on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Yasha and Jennifer.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm Jennifer Mullins from the Financial Aid Office here at Tech. And this is a unique and, to be honest, extra challenging year to be applying for financial aid for the first time. And I'm really pleased we have this opportunity to talk through the process with you. I'm joined by Yasha Baradawala, who works in our office. She's an assistant director in our office, and she's going to talk you through the student portion of the FAFSA, and then I'll come in and talk us through the parent section. So we're going to hand off, just like the new FAFSA has a handoff from one participant to another participant. So Yasha, would you go ahead and walk us through that student section?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Yasha, and I am a current tech student, also a tech alum. I just started grad school, so I'm excited to be here talking to you guys today and give you guys the student's perspective on what it's like to fill out the FAFSA form. Let's get started. We have our agenda for today. We'll just go through some of the basics of what the FAFSA is, some of the terminology, and then we'll walk you through both the student and parent contributor sections, as well as some of Georgia Tech's important financial aid deadlines. And then we'll have time to answer, hopefully have some time to answer some of your questions. Alrighty, so what is the FAFSA? Just to start off with the basics, the FAFSA is an acronym. It's the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it's an important step in the financial aid process. It's a math calculation, and it uses the information that the student and the parent puts into the form and calculates something called the Student Aid Index, and this determines your federal financial need. And it's typically used for federal grants, work studies, loans, and it launched recently on December 31st. I'm sure you guys have heard. And yeah, we recommend that you apply at FAFSA.ed.gov, and all eligible students should file the FAFSA form, including U.S. citizens, and legal non-U.S. citizens. International students do not need to fill out the FAFSA form. And now we're going to take you through some of the FAFSA lingo. It can be a bit of alphabet soup, when you look at the form, and especially if the terms are not familiar to you. And we just want to make sure that you guys know what you're getting yourself into. First off, the FSA ID, it's your username and password combination, and it's used to access any number of federal student aid processes. So it'll serve, so including the FAFSA, and it'll serve as your legally binding signature on the FAFSA, as well as other things related to the Department of Education. One thing that we really recommend is that if you do not have an FSA ID already, we really recommend that you get started on creating that, and we'll show you where you can create that on the site. It can take up to 3 to 4 days to process, and we don't want that to delay to hinder you reaching the priority deadline. The next is the SAI that I just mentioned, and it's just the output of the process FAFSA, and it calculates the student's federal financial need. It can be a negative number. I think negative 1,500 is the lowest number, and that just represents your maximum financial need. Next is contributor. So contributor is any individual, whether it be student, parent, multiple parents, a spouse, who's required to provide information on the FAFSA. And all contributors will require an FSA ID. So your parents will need to create one. And yeah, again, we recommend that you get started on that really soon if you haven't already. FTI is federal tax information, pretty straightforward. It includes any information from a tax return or other data that is going to be received from the IRS to the Department of Education during something that's called a FAFSA FTI exchange. Now, so the next term is the FAFSA FTI approval. And this will be the formal approval that you will give and your parents will give during the FAFSA application process. And with this approval, you're allowing the IRS and the DOE to exchange information in order to help you fill out your form in a more easier and quicker way. In the past, we used to have to do it manually, and it was not fun. And then Title IV just refers to all federal financial aid, including grants, loans, and work studies. Yeah, okay, so I did want to go through this, and this is how to know. So the FAFSA form will take you through a series of questions, and it will determine your status, whether you're dependent and independent. And majority of high school seniors coming into Georgia Tech are dependent students. And that is what the FAFSA will normally show you when you answer the questions. And I just want to go over that a dependent student, the determinants are typically that they're under 24, they're unmarried, they don't have any dependents, so they don't have any kids, and they're not a veteran. And then typically when you're a dependent student, you're going to have your parent information on the FAFSA. And then if you're a provisionally independent student, that the FAFSA will determine that, and you have further questions, we can definitely help you work through that process. So when do I file the FAFSA? The answer is now. The FAFSA opened on the 31st of December. And the priority deadline for financial aid at Georgia Tech is approaching really fast, and that's January 31st. So you really only have a few weeks to get this done. So we highly recommend that you get started, especially if you don't have an FSA ID. We really, really recommend that you create one as soon as possible. Alrighty, so let's go through the FAFSA. I'm going to take you through the student contributor section, and just let us know if you have any questions. So this is the first step, and again, it's really to create the FSA ID. This is the landing page, and we have highlighted up at the top right corner where it's circled, where you can log in or you can create an account. So you can create your FSA ID there, and once it gets verified, you can log in right there. And it'll take you to this login page. Now, once the student has their verified FSA ID, you're going to log in on studentaid.gov with your username and password that you created. And then it'll ask you whether you're the student or the parent. In this case, the hypothetical situation, we're going to be the student. So that's what we're going to click. And then it's going to take you to some onboarding screens. Now, this is just going to familiarize you with the FAFSA form if you need more information. It'll give you some information on what it is, on what to expect, how to invite your contributors, as well as how long it might take, and this changes for everyone, and what to expect after you've submitted the form. Alrighty, and then it'll ask you to confirm your student identity information. Now, this information is what you've entered when you created your FSA ID. So if you need to update any of this information, I've highlighted at the bottom of the screen where it says account settings. You can go over there and update any of these identities. You can't do it on this page, so just be aware and make sure that this is correct before moving forward. We've just heard that sometimes the new form is giving some issues when it comes to correcting these identifiers. Alrighty, and then it'll just ask you to confirm your permanent mailing address and your state of legal residence. And then it will immediately ask you for consent. So this is an important part of your application. And this is where the student is going to be asked to provide consent for their federal tax information to be exchanged. And really the FSA, their main takeaways, what they want you to take away is in that green box up there. Those are probably the most important points of this whole page. However, if you do have more questions, we highly recommend that you read all of this. It is important to note that those who do not approve, do not give consent, will not be eligible for federal financial aid. However, if you do approve, you're going to click approve in the bottom right-hand corner and it'll move straight forward and it'll do all of the typical finance questions that you would get in the back end. So you don't have to worry about answering those questions, which is great. And then it'll ask you about your personal circumstances. So this is where it's going to determine your dependency status. And it'll ask you about the student's marital status and your college and career plans. And these questions also will ask, it'll determine your contributor. What is important to know is a lot of the students coming into GT, they come in with a lot of credit, which is great, AP credits, dual enrollment. So you may classify with your credits as a sophomore or even a junior. For financial aid purposes, we really recommend that you click first year so you don't miss out on the amazing opportunities that Georgia Tech has for first years. And then these are some dependency questions as well, and we ask that you answer these with your utmost honesty. It'll also ask about any other circumstances. And again, the vast majority of high school seniors are dependent students. And these questions are going to determine whether or not you're going to have a parent contributor on this form. And then it'll ask you about your unusual circumstances. So this is another dependency question. And the FSA has a certain definition for unusual circumstances, and they've listed the examples there. So if any of those apply to you, please answer this question to the utmost honesty. And then it will show you your dependency status. So for many of you, potentially there's going to be this information that says that the student is dependent. So they're going to assume that there's going to be information about one or more parents on the FAFSA form. However, I know this screen brings up a few questions. So if the parent is unwilling to provide information and you don't fall into the unusual circumstances as the previous slide, you can apply for a direct loan. However, in most cases, the answer to this question is going to be no. You're going to have a parent contributor on your FAFSA and you can continue to fill out the form as normal. And then it's going to ask you to provide just a little bit of information about your parents. And this is also known as the wizard. So how the student answers these initial questions will also help guide the form to determine which parent will need to be included, whether it's one parent or both parents. Yeah. And then it's going to ask you to, okay, so this is also a really important slide. It's going to ask you to invite your parent or parents to the FAFSA form as contributors. A really important thing here to know is the information that you put in for your parent to invite needs to match their FSA ID exactly so that I can link up the account. If it doesn't match, the invite is not going to get sent. So we highly recommend that you confirm with your parents as to what email they used, just so that you can get this form filled out. We do get some questions that if the student has parents who are divorced or separated or never married, which contributor should they invite or which parent should they invite? The student is going to request that the parent who provides more than 50% of their financial support to serve as their contributor. And if you have any more questions with that, as to which parent to invite, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you. And then it's going to ask a bit about your demographics. It'll ask a variety of questions, and this information, is important to note, is only shared with the federal government and it's not shared with any schools or state organizations. It'll ask a variety of questions, some for research like gender, race, ethnicity, your normal questions, and then some for eligibility like citizenship. So if you're a US citizen, legal non-US citizen, your high school completion status, etc. And now we're getting to the end, you guys. We're just going to ask you some questions about your finances. The following questions in this section. Authorize whether there is a tax return to exchange information from when they do the FTI exchange that you gave approval for. The good news is that the bulk of the questions that the student might have otherwise answered are going to be transferred over, so you're not going to have to worry about this. There are just a few questions that you will be required to answer. The first is scholarship dollars that are reported as income to the IRS and foreign earned income exclusion. We're going to be really honest with you guys. The first one, scholarship dollars being reported as income, only refers to continuing college students and not first-time applicants. And then foreign earned income exclusion, very, very rare for this to apply to the average high school senior or current college student. So I'm going to say on average, your answer is going to be $0 for both of these. However, please answer these as per your 2022 tax returns and with the utmost honesty. And then it's going to ask you a few questions about your assets. So this part is also where the form gets a bit adaptive. So if the parent contributor has not submitted their portion yet, the student will see all of these asset questions and you'd answer this as best as you can. However, if the parent completes their portion of the FAFSA form first, and the FAFSA determines that as a result of income and household size, that the student is exempt from reporting assets, the form will remove this question from the student contributor section. And even if you do answer this before your parents and the form then realizes that you're exempt, it won't take these questions into consideration. So just make sure if this comes up on your form, make sure to fill this out as best as you can, and then we'll hit continue. And then students will be asked to list the colleges that they would like to receive the FAFSA. This year, students can list up to 20 schools, and you can search by school name or by school code. Georgia Tech's federal school code is 001569. And yeah, Georgia Tech is looking forward to getting your FAFSA. And then you're almost done. You're going to take a minute to review all of the sections before signing. You're going to see the summary page where you can expand each section, see what you've put down, if you need to make any changes. And it's going to take you, and it's going to confirm that you've shared this with your contributors, what date you've sent it, if your parent contributors have started working on it, so you can give them a little nudge if they haven't. And then you're going to sign and complete your part. And again, the most important part of this page is the green box. It might look a little bit different on your form. However, that's what the FSA wants you to take away from this. It's asking you, that you've answered this form with the utmost accuracy and honesty. And then you're going to sign. And it's going to say that your section is complete, which is great. In this situation, the parent contributor needs to complete their section. And once completed, the whole form will be submitted for processing. But until then, the form is going to be held off, and we're going to wait for the entire thing to be done. And then you'll receive an email of something that looks like this, and it'll tell you about the next steps, when you can view your FAFSA submission summary, and that your FAFSA form still needs contributor information. An important thing to know, so this is an email that your parents will get when you invite them to the form. An important thing to know is that forms are deleted after 45 days of inactivity. So it's really important to make sure that your parent gets it done in that 45-day period that you've started the form, and that if your parent starts the form, that you get it done as soon as possible so that duplicate work does not need to be done. And you can see that note at the bottom of that first screen. Again, this is an example of an email that your parents might receive or the contributor might receive when you invite them to the form to help fill out and finish the FAFSA form. And now we're going to pivot to the parent contributor section. And yeah, Jennifer, I'll let you take the lead on this.
Great. Thank you so much, Yasha. So Yasha and I talked about this, and we thought it might be good to just step away from the slides for a minute. And Yasha has just filled out the form as a student, and I've just filled out the form as a parent. So we were going to take a minute to share our personal experiences and then get back to the slides and the FAFSA walk through. So Yasha, could you just tell us a little bit about your experience filling out the FAFSA and any challenges that you encountered?
Yes, definitely. So with the December 31st launch, I decided to fill it out shortly after that. And there were a few hiccups. I learned that I had to sign in a few times, just had to be patient with the FAFSA form. Um, but once I got in, it was pretty smooth sailing. I realized when I got to the finances section that, you know, since I'm an independent student now that I'm a grad student, I needed my tax information. And so I made sure to save my draft. I got my tax information. And from then onwards, it was my tax return, my 2022 tax return. And from then on, it was pretty easy and pretty smooth to complete the FAFSA form. It took me maybe 30 minutes. So it was not bad at all. Yeah, I made sure to verify all of my information because I've heard that that has been causing issues about people going in and needing to correct information. Um, but otherwise it was pretty smooth sailing. And I know, yeah, it's been great, Jennifer. I know that you've been working also on the FAFSA form. So if you want to share your experience as well, that'd be
Right. So I think in the interest of full disclosure, I have
good.
18 years experience in financial aid, and my daughter's FAFSA is still not all the way complete. So we were able to successfully complete her section, and then my section is completed, but her dad and I file separate taxes. And so we needed to have him as a contributor too. And so we are one of the people who were caught in that loop of trying to get another contributor who didn't have an FSA ID set up with an FSA ID. And I think this brings us to some of the advice. Yasha's mentioned it already. This is definitely a situation where it makes sense to take a minute and go slow and get everything right. So what we understand is that even using a letter as lowercase versus uppercase or having an extra space in there, you need those little details. If there isn't a perfect match, there are problems continuing, and you have to step back and then approach it again. But I'm confident we're all going to work through this, right? It'll be okay. But it's a process, and we're all learning through it.
Definitely.
And I did reach out to our student assistants in the office. I asked everyone to go ahead and in our office, in the admissions office, and we are starting to have reports of successfully completed dependent student FAFSAs. So, that's great to hear. But I guess now, like the handoff. So with the FAFSA, either the student can begin or the parent can begin. And then you indicate who is going to be contributing next. And we do want to mention with regard to the word contributor here means information. So it doesn't mean who's going to be paying. It's not any kind of commitment to pay. This is about who is contributing information on the FAFSA. And so for the parent contributor, there are going to be a number of forms that look very similar to the forms that Yasha already walked us through on the student side. And so, we can walk through these relatively quickly, I think, because they're going to look very familiar. As we log in, we have the indicator where it will say you've been asked to be a contributor for the student name. It's good just to touch base and check that that you are doing the parent role now for the student. And see, I want to come down. So the okay, parent identity information. Again, this is another point where you pause and double check at this point that absolutely everything is letter perfect before you move on. Because again, if there's anything that isn't correct here, the time to work on fixing it is right now before you move on. And you do have to do this by going to the account settings here. It is a process, but it can be worked through as long as you address it at this point. Current mailing address is really straightforward. And sorry, it skipped there. This is the consent form. It mirrors the consent form that students complete. And again, the big advantage of this is that it means that you will not be spending an hour going through the tax return and entering line by line the financial data. This is what is giving permission for the automatic retrieval of the IRS data. And it does really simplify the process once it works. Okay, demographics, again, the same caveats that Yasha mentioned hold true for parents as well. I will mention with regard to state of legal residence, I wanted to mention that this has no bearing on your residency at the schools that you're applying to. If you're applying to state schools, then residency matters. I think nearly everyone on this call is a Georgia resident, and so you'll be putting Georgia in here. This doesn't have any bearing on your residency, which is determined by the registrar at each institution. This is actually used for determining how much state tax your family pays, and it's part of the calculation of eligibility. The parent current marital status is used as part of, there's the wizard that helps determine dependency, and then there's a wizard that will help you determine which parent plus potentially parent spouse needs to provide information as contributors on the FAFSA. And so those questions will walk you through additional questions until you have a clear answer. On finances, again, this should be much more simple for the majority of families because nearly everything is coming directly over from the FAFSA. There is a screen, though, that asks about federal benefits because if the family qualifies for certain federal benefits that are listed here, then there are automatic changes to the formula, which benefit the family in terms of eligibility and also simplify the process further. And so you read through the list, see if any of them apply. And if not, then you click down at the bottom. None of these apply. Okay. The parent tax filing status question is asking whether the parents filed a joint tax return in 2022. If the answer is yes, then the process will be more simple because the parent who is filling this out will have to provide spouse information, but that spouse will not have to provide independent information themselves. If you say no, there are additional questions that will again help determine who needs to provide information. Okay. So for family size, the question is asking if the family size is different from the number of individuals claimed on the tax return. Interestingly, I've been reading some advice that it is a good idea to just check yes to this because at this point, right, early days in the FAFSA, because then subsequently you'll have an opportunity to check what number of exemptions was pulled over from the IRS and just verify that it is the correct number. So I'm hearing reports that that people are not completely understanding what number is being pulled over or why that number is being pulled over, even in cases where the tax return seems pretty straightforward. So here I said no in our case, right? In our case, it is different. So I said yes. And so I'm hearing reports that yes may be the way to go because then you just have a chance to check at a later point that the information is correct. Yes, so it gives an example of family size. In the past, it was called household size. Now it's called family size. This will include the student, the parents, parent or parents, and then any other dependents of that parent. There is a question on the FAFSA about numbering college, and this is only asking about the children, how many of the children in the family are in college. It's not asking about the parents. This question has been widely publicized that it no longer affects the formula that's used to determine eligibility, but it's being asked for research purposes, and I think it does not hurt for families to you put the correct information here, and then the school will have that information also. Okay, for tax return information, there are just really a few questions here. The first is whether or not the parents received the earned income tax credit. And you can answer yes or no. And if you're not sure, you can do don't know and get additional information. For the amount of college grant scholarships or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income, If the parent is not a student themselves, and if they are not in a situation where they need to report any benefits for anyone else, then the likelihood is that this is zero. Foreign income earned, the foreign earned income exclusion is also important to report if it applies. And so again, you just check the tax return, see if that applies, and you probably know right off the bat if it's likely to apply or not. There's a handy thing on the new FAFSA questions where if you're not sure about something, for example, the earned income tax credit, it's not appearing on the screen because this is from the prototype that was published, but there's a little question mark that appears next to the question up in a circle, and you can click on that. There are actually very helpful pop-outs that show up that give you much more detailed information that tell you where to look for that earned income tax credit amount on the tax return. And so if there are questions, there are really pretty good help aids built into the new FAFSA. So we encourage you to take advantage of those. Okay. Annual child support received is listed here as a question, and it's asking about, this is about 2022. Actually, it's asking last complete calendar year, says 2023. This year, child support is going to be counted as an asset. In prior years, it was asked as an income question. Now it's being asked as an asset question and will count in the asset part of the formula. And this isn't completely intuitive, but it actually is helpful because assets are assessed at a lower rate than income. So in general, for families that are receiving child support, it's helpful that you're reporting it, that it's being counted as an asset as opposed to being counted as income. Even if it no longer exists as an asset, it's still benefiting you that it's being reported that way instead of as income. For parental assets, the rules are the same as the rules for students. So you're looking at the asset value as of today. The total amount for cash, savings, and checking accounts goes in that first question. Then for the current net worth of business and investment farms, you're looking for the value minus anything owed against it to get net value. In the case of an investment farm, if the family runs the farm as a business, but they live on the farm, the value of the home, just like the value of any other home, doesn't count. But the value of the income producing land, equipment, and so forth, stock, that counts as asset value. And the same is true for any other homes or any other real estate other than the home that you live in. They would be reported in that last question, the current investment, net worth of investments, including real estate. Okay, now, if there is another parent who needs to be listed, their information would be provided here. Again, take it slow and make sure the information is exactly correct so that it matches the information in that parent's FSA ID, or if they don't already have an FSA ID, the information that they will be using to create their FSA ID. Okay, this page also mirrors the student page, but I wanted to mention that I think quite a few people have already looked at this and kind of thought it's the signature page and that it ought to be possible to click on signature, but you can't click on signature. This is the opportunity to review those first three sections, and then you click on continue and move on to the next slide, and that's where you actually are able to sign the form. This form lets you know that you've successfully completed the process. You can give yourself a pat on the back, and it lets you know what the next steps are. And so this is really letting you know you are near the end of the process. The FAFSA submission summary is giving you the basic information about when it was received, when it was processed. And for this year, we are recommending that families go ahead and screenshot this just to have a record, because there is a little bit of uncertainty over when schools will start receiving FAFSA data. It just doesn't hurt this year to have this information on file. When we receive the records absolutely should tell us when you submitted it. So it won't be based on when we receive it, but it will tell us when you submitted it. It will give us additional date information. So we're fully expecting that to be in place, but I think it's the kind of year where it's just a good idea to maintain good records and keep lines of communication extra clear. Okay. This is information about estimated financial aid based on the information that was provided. And so if there is Pell Grant eligibility based on the information provided, there will be an estimated amount, kind of a maximum amount for Pell Grant that shows up. It will also give an estimate of federal direct loan eligibility. For work study, it'll just tell you that you may be eligible if that's the case. So it won't provide a specific dollar amount. That will vary from school to school. And it will give you the number called the Student Aid Index, which is the number used by schools to determine federal financial need. Your Student Aid Index will be the same at every school that you apply to, but your financial need will be different at each school because each school will take their individual cost of attendance and then subtract the Student Aid Index in order to get the financial need at that specific school. This is one more opportunity to review the information on the FAFSA. So you have an opportunity to do drop downs and just check everything to make sure it's all correct. And this gives you the opportunity to also make a correction if you need to do so. I think at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Yasha, and then I'm going to pop into the Q&A for a minute and let Yasha take it from here to bring us across the finish line.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, yes, at this point, your FAFSA is complete, which is awesome. And like Jennifer said, on this form, you will be able to, verify the information that you've put in the student section and the parent section. If you need to make a correction, it will lead to a new submission. So from the time you make a correction, it might take the additional 2 days to verify that. On this page as well, you can see on the top where it says eligibility overview FAFSA form answers. You can also tab over to school information and see the schools that you've selected to send the FAFSA to, as well as next steps. You'll see, I think there's like a little exclamation mark or something next to the next step. So in the case that you get selected for verification, the next steps will show you the additional documents that you need to upload and that you need to send in. And it's not anything to worry if you do get selected for verification, but it's important to know where to find that information. Okay, let's see. Okay. I just want to go over some of the deadlines that Georgia Tech has for our financial aid process. We break it down into 4 steps. And the first step is the Georgia Tech application for scholarships and financial aid. So this is for all aid applicants. This must be completed for all aid applicants. Anybody who wants financial aid at Georgia Tech must complete the GT app for the 24-25 year, especially if you're joining us in the fall. We have had a few students that have been amazing and have been proactive, but they end up completing the wrong form. So please make sure you fill out the 24-25 GT app if you want to be considered for any sort of financial aid. And then step 2, hopefully at this point you've all got a head start on this now, is the FAFSA. And this will be for all applicants for need-based aid. So federal work studies, grants, loans, etc. And then step 3 is the College Board CSS profile. So this is required for incoming first-year students who want to be considered for need-based assistance from Georgia Tech's institutional funds. We've got a lot of institutional funds here at Georgia Tech and great opportunities for first years. However, if you want to be eligible for this and if you want to be considered for this, the College Board CSS profile needs to be filled out. And then step 4 is the Georgia Student Financial Aid application. This is for Georgia residents. And this is the state aid application for Georgia residents who want to be considered for Hope Brazil. If you want to be considered for Hope Brazil Miller scholarships, which is a great opportunity here in the state of Georgia, that's also required. And all 4 of these steps must be completed by January 31st. So this is the priority deadline for financial aid at Georgia Tech. This is if you want to guarantee being considered. Obviously, you can turn it in afterwards, but the priority deadline at Georgia Tech is January 31st, 2024. We highly, highly recommend that you get it in before then so that you can be considered and start your first year at Georgia Tech off on the right foot. If you have any questions at all during this financial aid process, it may seem daunting, but we've got your back. Please reach out to us at finaid.gatech.edu and we'd be happy to help you. And if you want to speak to a financial aid advisor and schedule an appointment, you can also email us. Our office hours are from 9 to 4, and you can find more information on the FAFSA and on those other steps, on these 4 steps on our website, which is finaid.gatech.edu. And hopefully this PowerPoint will get sent out to you so you have access to this information. And for any questions related to admission, please reach out to the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, and you can send them questions in at admissions@gatech.edu. We have some lovely people in the Q&A that have helped answer questions from the admissions office, and you can also visit their website, which is admissions.gatech.edu, for any more information or any more questions that you want to get answered. And we're excited to have you here. We're excited to help you, and we can't wait for you guys to be done with your financial aid applications, so you guys can put that behind you. And now we'll take questions. I'm going to pass this over to Jennifer, and Andrew will help us out too. I think
Awesome.
Andrew, okay,
Thank you. Yep, I was muted. Had to happen at least once. Huge thank you to Yasha and Jennifer for walking through the process, both on the student side as well as the parent and guardian side. I've learned a lot sitting through it, so I hope all of you who have been in it, filling out your FAFSA. So thank you so much. One question just to remind everyone, we've got a number of questions regarding the recording of this. We are recording this webinar. We will be sharing that with all of our applicants next week, so stay tuned. Typically, we will also copy any parent or guardian as well on that email. We understand it as a group effort to fill this out, so stay tuned for that, but we definitely know this is a valuable presentation, so we will get that out to everyone. So I think to kick it off, one of the first questions to ask, there are a lot of questions about who needs to fill out the parent guardian section. And so Jennifer, if you can talk through a little bit more of, if parents are filing their taxes jointly, who needs to complete that parent guardian section, as well as if you can share a little bit more about FSA IDs and who needs those. I think that I saw as a theme throughout the Q&A. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. So that's really good questions, right? So in terms of parents who file jointly, so if the student's parents are married to each other and they filed jointly in 2022, then only one parent needs an FSA ID, and only that one parent needs to fill out the FAFSA, although they will be providing information about the other parent. But then that joint tax return should automatically transfer and fill in the joint information for both parents. And so in that way, you just have one FSA ID and one parent needing to be involved in filling out the FAFSA, because the information from the IRS transfer will automatically include the joint income information. So in other instances, I think really the best thing to do is to really go step by step through the questions in what they call the wizard, right? The dependency wizard, so that you can see, it will direct you to ask which parent, are your parents married or divorced? Which parent provided more support? And so it'll kind of go through all of those questions and help you know. It'll ask about the marital status of that parent who provided more support, and just go through step by step by step to help you figure out who needs to fill it out. If there are two parents who need to provide information and those parents did not file jointly in 2022, for whatever reason, for example, it could be that the parent who needs to provide information is now married to someone they were not married to in 2022, but that person's information is relevant. And so you've got, those are the two parents. And so the questions will just walk you through who needs to provide information, which parent, and then that parent's spouse, and then it should be a straightforward process from there.
And while we're kind of talking about that, and FSA ID is I also saw people having some trouble creating those. So any advice that you would give for a family that is still trying to get their FSA IDs set up to complete the FAFSA?
Sure. So we know that there are some challenges. So the known issues are to just make sure that each data element is absolutely correct. And but it can take up to 3 to 4 days for the FSA ID to be created. So it can be just a waiting process. I have seen reports that, and I'm a Mac user personally, but I have seen reports that Safari is not the way to go. So I have seen reports that things seem to be working better on Chrome or Edge. And so just a little bit of browser information. Additionally, I have definitely started seeing reports that even though it takes some patience, you can get through to that FAFSA helpline that is sort of advertised throughout the FAFSA. And so it is possible to get through. So in certain situations, there's just a need to wait and come back to it. But if there's some kind of fatal error where something is incorrect, and if the steps to correct it don't work, then it really is something where you're going to want to call. And from what I'm understanding, and I might be facing this myself, it is a matter of being patient, calling that number, and like having some good music on in your environment, and maybe having some cookies or something to help you deal with the hold time, because I think there is some hold time involved, but people are getting through and the problems are getting fixed. So there's some instances where an account has to be deleted and then you have to start over. But I think that's the exception, not the rule. And so that's kind of where we are in terms of what we know right now.
Awesome. And go for it, Yasha. Sorry.
I
Yeah,
just wanted to
Yasha.
add one thing. It's important to note that you can only have one FSA ID per person. So if a parent is having an issue, and this is because it's linked to your social security number. So if you try to create multiple accounts, it's not going to let you, and you're going to run into this error where it'll say, there's already an account for this social security and for this birth date. So it might be a case that, you've created an FSA ID and you don't remember. There's a way to recover your username and password, and it might be just trying that to see if that works out. And if not, then yeah, the helpline has been great. That's what I've heard. Some people having some great success with that if the issue is persistent. But I just wanted to add that on.
Yeah.
Great. And kind of, I guess, along those lines, I actually had one of our student assistants in undergraduate admission. Her father and her were filling out the FAFSA and trying to submit it today, and were having some trouble. And they actually called and got it all taken care of pretty quickly from FAFSA. But on that note, Jennifer, what you mentioned it earlier, and I kind of saw a few questions about this, but you've gotten everything complete and you're at that end and you're trying to sign and you're having trouble. I feel like that might be something that is tripping people up. What is some advice there?
Sure. So I think what happens is it's kind of in the layout of the form. You get to the page that gives you the opportunity to review all the information. And for all the other items, you can drop down and look at the information. And then at the bottom, it has signature, and it looks for all the world like something you should be able to click on in order to sign, but it isn't. That screen is kind of the precursor to the screen where you actually sign. And so you actually have to scroll all the way down. There's a button in the bottom right corner. So you click on that, and then that will move you forward to the screens that let you actually sign the form. And so I think it's just something about the layout that maybe it could be tweaked for next year, because I thought the same thing looking at that form when I did it.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I think we have some questions, I think, not so much about the submitting the FAFSA, but kind of moving into some of our Georgia Tech, some specific financial aid when it comes to Georgia Tech. One question that I can kind of start off and answer and then have some for you. One question was just a little bit more about merit-based aid, and just to kind of share a little bit about that process. Students who are who have applied during Early Action 1 or Early Action 2 will automatically be considered for some of our limited merit-based aid that we do award. Most of the aid that Georgia Tech does award is going to be need-based aid that is going to use the financial aid applications that we've been discussing this evening. But there's no additional to be considered for merit aid. You will automatically be considered if you applied for Early Action 1 or 2. There's no additional steps that are needed. So I saw that question. It's a question I get all the time in undergraduate admission, and I know my colleagues in our financial aid office get that one as well. So wanted to share that. Talking a little bit specifically for our Georgia residents, I get this question all the time and saw it specifically regarding Hope and the Zell Miller Scholarship, and that's really what a student is concerned about. That's kind of what they are hoping to get and want to make sure it is secure and in their financial aid package. What has to be done, Jennifer, if that is the scholarship that they are looking to receive?
Sure. So we want everyone, absolutely everyone, to do the Georgia Tech application for scholarships and financial aid, which is a one-page online form that I promise will take you 90 seconds max to fill out. And so do that. There's absolutely no downside to doing it. That gets you in our system and it lets us know what kind of financial aid you want to receive. So that's one key piece. The other thing you need to do is, if you haven't already done this, you go out to the Georgia Futures website and you complete the Georgia Student Finance application. So you're doing the application directly for Hope and Zell Miller. Now, doing the FAFSA also, if you've done the FAFSA and the Georgia Tech specific application for financial aid, we will set up your Hope and Zell Miller based on those two things. But I encourage you to do the GSF apps also, because that is good for 10 years, right? It's good every year. The FAFSA is 1 year. If what you really want is your Hope and Zell Miller to be set up, I would do that form, and then you're kind of set, except for doing the quick form every year, the one-page Georgia Tech application. Every year, you're set at that point. The first year, I think it is really good to go ahead and do the FAFSA, even if you don't think you'll qualify, even if you're it's a little bit of a hassle. I think it's a good idea to do it, but you don't have to if what you really want is just to get your Hope or Zell Miller set up.
Great. And then the other question that I've been seeing quite a bit is regarding the summer, which just makes me think of warm weather because it is not great out right now here in Georgia. But we have a great summer program. We have a large group of students that participate in our Ignite program, where students take classes in late June and July and get a jump start on their Georgia Tech education. And that does throw a little bit of a wrench in financial aid. And so, Jennifer, can you walk through, if a student is either admitted to the summer or is considering enrolling in the Ignite program and starting in the summer, what else do they need to do?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. The good news is that even though you will have to do another FAFSA, that FAFSA is up and running and you'll use the same FSA ID. And it definitely works, and it's been running for years now. So you will need to do a GT app, a Georgia Tech application for scholarships and financial aid for each year, because summer is part of the school year we're in right now. So you'll do the application for this year and the application for fall. But we are completely used to this happening. It happens all the time. There's so many great opportunities that are happening in the summer now. Including some of those summer study abroad programs, right? So it's lots of exciting things happening in the summer. And so you're just going to do applications for both years. It's kind of a little bit unusual because typically we will end up evaluating aid and getting the offer out for fall first, and then we'll come back and do summer right after that, just because it's the rhythm that we're in. But it's completely routine. If you have any questions, just let us know.
Awesome. Thank you. And kind of on that note of rhythm and kind of what happens next now, right? And so a student has hit submit on the FAFSA and they log into Oscar, and that's not what they're seeing today, right? And so
Right.
can you kind of maybe walk through a little bit about what's happening and a little bit of the behind the scenes of what we're working on right now, but then kind of what the next few months will look like for students when it comes to financial aid?
Yeah, sure. So this is the part that I completely understand. This is frustrating, right? Because you do the FAFSA, you get that congratulations, you're done banner, and then you log into Oscar and it says financial aid FAFSA required, and it has not changed out of required status. And that is because at this point, schools, so not just Georgia Tech, but all schools cannot yet receive FAFSA data. It's not available for us to download yet. We're expecting by the end of January, is what we're being told at this point, that we will be able to download those applications. I think it will probably take potentially through the end of the first week in February for us to receive all of them, because we're expecting there are lots of eager people out there doing their FAFSAs right now. But by the end of that first week in February, you should be able to log into Oscar and see that your FAFSA is now in a satisfied status. It's showing up as complete. In addition, when we get those records, we will be able to see the date that you submitted it. And so that is the date that is important to us, not the date that we downloaded it. And so our deadline is January 31st. If we download it on February 4th or February 5th, that is completely fine. It's still absolutely on time.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I think the one last thing is once that is submitted and you have your financial aid applications on file, and eventually you will see them all complete in Oscar in your GT account, my colleagues in the Office of Scholarship and Financial Aid will be working through processing all of those. And so typically in early April is when you will expect to see some sort of financial aid package. So it does mean you have to kind of sit tight and wait a little bit, but there are thousands of documents that our teams are going through to process those. So want to thank my colleagues in financial aid for all that work there. And also thank some of my colleagues as well who have been busy online answering lots of your questions. We've received over 200 questions. It seems they're still busy typing. Just kind of a few housekeeping notes as we wrap up, as we come to the hour. If your questions were not answered, both the Office of Admission, the Office of Financial Aid are available to assist you. Our contact information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out if you do have questions or are encountering some kind of challenge. And there's people here at Georgia Tech that are going to help you work through those. Other reminder too, we had a lot of questions regarding this session being recorded and when this will be shared out. And so at some point again next week, you should see an email from us sharing this recording and sharing some of the FAQs and some other reminders based off of some of the types of questions that we saw tonight. But again, I want to thank all of you for taking some time and being with us to participate in this webinar. I want to thank Yasha and Jennifer for sharing a wealth of knowledge, and thank all of my colleagues that have been behind the scenes answering all your questions as well. So thank you all and have a good night. And here at Georgia Tech, we always like to end with a big Go Jackets. So thank you.